So in past videos, I've talked about my impressions of this $170 Iwata airbrush, and in a very recent video, I unboxed and gave you my impressions of this $30 airbrush, and now we're gonna go somewhere in the middle looking for that Goldie Locks airbrush. This is the Mobius airbrush by Gallery. This thing runs right around $80. Let's see how it stacks up to the rest of them. So let's go ahead and unbox this thing. And if this is your first time to the channel, my name's Franco. I'm a professional engineer, a lure designer and lure builder and lure painter, and an avid fisherman. So pretty nice set of instructions here. Nice and simple to get you started. And I like this schematic. It has all the parts of the gun laid out so that you can see where they go and what they're called. And here's a nice little detail, a little note to the customer. And here it says that if you find any issues with this gun, that don't bother to send it back, just contact them and they'll send you a replacement. That's pretty nice. And they've got the contact information at the bottom. So here's a really nice little feature, a set of O-rings. This also came with the less expensive airbrush, but it doesn't look to be as complete as that one. Still, real nice feature. So this is really beautiful packaging. It looks like a jewel box. So this is kind of neat. It's lube, and I don't think I even have any actual airbrush lube at all. I'll have to check the instructions to see what they recommend lubing. Obviously it's going to be the moving parts, but there's some areas really you shouldn't get any lube in. Let's take a look at the gun itself. So this really is a beautiful gun. Very nicely polished out. It's really just silky smooth and has a very nice stylized sort of sculptured needle tail protector. Comes off right here. Alright, so this whole assembly has come out, and that's because the needle tail protection piece here, this chrome part, is a little bit too snug on, there it goes, on the needle actuator part of the body, which is this very finely made combination of brass and chrome here. And we'll go ahead and just loosen this little nut here that actually pinches down on the needle, and we'll put this needle in a safe place here. So this assembly is actually kind of unique. Most of them don't look like this. And you can see this is what houses the spring that returns the needle after you let go of the trigger. And it looks like it has an adjustable tension knob here, and that's that chrome piece right there. It's kind of nice because a lot of times the spring is just a little too strong and you actually have to work pretty hard with your trigger finger. Let's see how far we can back it off. Yeah, that makes it a lot softer. That's pretty unique, and it might make a lot of difference if you're actually doing a lot of airbrushing for a long period of time to spare your trigger finger a bit. It comes already fitted with a quick connect male portion right here at the valve. And that looks to be a pretty standard looking valve. I'm not going to pull that apart. Not right now anyway. There's really nothing to these valves if you're looking at, it's a plunger with a spring on it. There's really not much to it. So here's the business end of the airbrush, the actual nozzles. And if we can pull off the outer nozzle, this is kind of like the dispersion nozzle at the very end. Pull that off and then pull off the inner one. This covers the actual spray nozzle where the needle comes in. Right here, the needle will come through there. And there's one of our little white O-ring. And that just sort of press fits into the body in here. So far, the quality of actual manufacture is really, really good. Pretty impressed. Everything seems to be machined absolutely beautifully. So the trigger is also really unique. It's one piece that doesn't have a little pivot point on it the way most guns have them, like this one right here. And the trigger pad is really nice. It's got a nice friction knurling pattern, but it's also wedge shaped. I don't know if you can see that, but it's wedge shaped, so as you're pushing back, there's actually a better shape on your finger. I'm looking forward to trying that out. All right, let's reassemble this thing and give it a try. You've noticed I haven't used any tools to pull it apart. I hate it when I have to have a bunch of little wrenches or screwdrivers to take anything this simple apart. But I have to say, putting in this trigger is a lot easier than the typical trigger installation because that little pivot point on the other triggers makes for a difficult entry there. I usually guide the tip with the end of my finger so it slides in and never catches on anything, because the very, very tip is really important to stay nice, clean, and straight. And we'll just ease it in and tighten this down. Give ourselves a little more tension on the spring. That feels pretty good. And we'll put the needle tail protector back on. And it does have a nice little needle limiter at the very end that will either allow you to pull it all the way back, or you can tweak it down and minimize the amount of paint you actually pull back on. All right, the last thing that we need to put on there is the cup. And it comes with a nice cover. And again, super finely polished. The inside is just like glass, really nice. And it just screws onto the body, which I like, but you know, there's also some downside. The fact that you end up with a really deep throat down in here that becomes a little more difficult to clean. It's narrow and it's deep, but the fact that you can get the cup all the way off at least gives you a better access. Overall, it feels really nice in my hand. It's not a light gun, and last time we talked, I did talk a lot about weight and how much I like a lighter gun. So let's do a quick check. We'll take all three guns and we'll weigh them and see if by paying more you get less weight. The weight should be inversely proportional to the price. So the more you pay, the lighter a gun you should get. All right, we're going to be measuring in grams. So I'm going to start with the most expensive, the Iwata. This is a $170 gun, and it's about 108 grams. And this is the one we're reviewing today. This is the $80 Mobius, and it is 115 grams. And now for the least expensive of the three, this is our $30 Neo Deco, and it's exactly 89 grams. So that's a mixed bag, but I kind of knew that going in because the Neo Deco includes an aluminum cup. And the difference in weight between the cups is 7 for the aluminum, 7 grams for the aluminum, and twice that, almost 15 grams for the chrome-plated brass. So the heaviest one is the middle-of-the-road $80 version, and you can feel the heft of this. The casting seems to be a little bigger, a little thicker, and obviously then a little bit heavier. So if you've got hand strength or wrist strength issues, going with a lighter gun might be the best thing for you. Now, I don't really make a habit of putting any lubrication in mine. I kind of depend on having the gun be clean and on the quality of the build so that there's no areas that have like excess friction. So far, I've been pretty lucky. None of my guns have really been sticky. The other thing is when you put lubrication in here, you do run a little bit of a risk of fouling your paint with lubrication. Now, if your gun is operating right and isn't completely worn out, that should never really happen. And let me show you why. Alright, so if you look at this sort of very rudimentary schematic of the inside of a gun, imagine this is cut away. So starting from the back, you got the needle tail cover that's not cut away. This is the assembly that controls the needle, and then here's our trigger that plunges into the air valve right here that connects to our air hose. Now what happens when you push down the trigger, it releases air from this valve, and that air doesn't run through the whole body. It runs through a channel away from the paint, away from the needle, and goes down and then shoots out and around the nozzle at the very end, and because of Venturi effects is sped up around the nozzle, and that draws our red paint out through the nozzle. So realistically, no lubrication back here should ever reach our paint. But if we have any leaks in our valve or any bad O-rings somewhere, there is a possibility that you could foul the paint. Now, if that's the case, you won't be able to paint because your gun is probably going to be malfunctioning so badly, you won't be able to get a good flow on the paint. And if you're getting something out of this video, do me a solid and leave me a like, drop a comment, subscribe if you haven't. Let's kick the algorithm in the butt a little bit, see if we can't grow this channel a little faster. All right, I've got it hooked up to my air. Now I want to set the pressure to 30 psi because I want to do one more test. I've got a little wind speed indicator here, and this is something I use at a launch site when I'm hang gliding, but it's going to work just fine to figure out how much flow we get out of these, and we'll test all three of the airbrushes. All right, we'll start off with the Mobius, and I'm going to try to hold all the airbrushes about the same distance away from the little fan. I saw 17.5. Let's try the little Neo Echo. All right, I saw 15.5. That's maximum. Now let's try the Iwata. All right, I saw 20 exactly. All right, looks like airflow goes down with the price. And that does make a little bit of a difference because you really want to be able to have as much airflow with the least amount of pressure. That usually gives you the best results when you're painting. Now I'm going to be using this Testors Aztec black paint, and I know this to be a good paint right out of the bottle. And it's also what I used when I was testing the other two. So if you want to see that, check out the video that I link up here somewhere. All right, of course, every gun takes a little bit of time to get used to, so we'll see how this one works out. First thing I like to do is try to make small dots. And I can see this really has a very sensitive trigger. I have to say it's going to take me a little bit to get used to it, but I certainly can make some very tiny, little bit of tip drawing there pretty quickly. Let's clear it. Very sensitive trigger. If you have your weight of your finger on it at all, it starts to put paint out. Let's try a line. That's pretty good. Try shading a little bit. A dot, and then the spatter. Okay, so just looking at this dot, it looks like it is a little bit fuzzier than I would expect. And these lines are a little bit, just a tiny bit raggedy. Let's try some more lines. It's not bad. Let's try some thicker lines. So this gun is a little bit unforgiving on someone like me who is used to turning the air on and off, which is a technique you really shouldn't use. You should have the air on and leave it on and just feather in the paint where you need it and then turn the air off. And then when you come in, you shouldn't have any kind of blotch. All in all, I'm liking it. It does make a nice line. And I think you really can get a very, very fine line if you want to. Almost ballpoint pen quality on that line. Because the trigger is just so sensitive. But I'm starting to get it a little bit there, how well that's showing up, but I've got some really tight dots. And then I got sloppy at the end. So yeah, just working gradients of lines where it's a little shabby. I think mostly that's me. I'm just a little bit hesitant to pull the trigger too much. Super sensitive. All right, let's see what it would look like if I'm trying to paint a big area. That's pretty good. Now the graininess of the actual paint distribution is a lot of times more due to the paint than it is to the gun. So that's difficult to tell. I would have to use a couple of different paints. All right, so I'd give this thing probably a B+. It paints really well. It definitely has the feel of a gun that's very sensitive. So I would say it's not a beginner airbrush. This is something you want to work your way up to. Or have a lot of patience and just do a lot of practicing. Because I think in an afternoon, you could probably get this dialed in pretty well. I'm definitely going to practice with this thing a little more. I think it's going to be a really nice gun for very small, defined areas on lures. So it's probably going to be my kind of sniper rifle. Thank you for watching. If you have any additional questions, put them in the comments. And if you have any suggestions for videos where I go over products or techniques or materials or even equipment, let me know. Put them in the comments and we'll see what we can get to. I'll see you next Friday. And then cleaning is just a matter of rinsing out the cup, back airing it, and then we'll pull the cup off to clean out the inside. And then a soft brush is a good idea on the inside there to get anything else out. And there you go, nice and clean.